Hi, welcome to Gene Rants. I'm Gene, and I guess today I'm a little torn about what to talk about. Two major events that I could talk about, but if I try to cover both, then this vlog could be too long. One topic, obviously, is the elections that took place the day before I'm recording this, 2 days before you're seeing it. The big races were the governorships of New Jersey and Virginia, and the mayor's race in New York City, and Proposition 50. That's the one that has national implications. That is, uh, it was a vote, a referendum, I guess you would call it, in California to bypass the independent district that was set up for redistricting, for determining congressional districts. So now California can go ahead and try to create five five. I mean, there aren't that many. The number of congressional districts, Republican congressional districts in California, doesn't come close to reflecting the amount of the number of Republicans in California. Now it's going to get worse because California now is going to be able to create five more Democrat districts to offset the five Republican districts that were created in Texas. So I understand there's going to be a legal challenge to the one for what California did. We'll see how that shakes out, and if something, any news on that, I'll of course keep everybody informed. Other than that, the Democrats swept all three races, the two governorships and the mayor's race. And I could talk more about that. Maybe I will in another vlog, but that's not the main. Weighing the importance, what I'm going to talk about today is more important. The Trump tariffs. Trump is imposing tariffs, as we all know, on every country in the world. He's claiming emergency powers to do that, and the Supreme Court heard the case today, and the oral arguments, and I listened to them. I missed the first part of, a few minutes of it, but I listened to most of it, and I just give you my thoughts on it, my thoughts on how it's going. And my thoughts are that I would actually not be surprised if the Supreme Court ruled against Trump, against the government, unanimously. Because I listened to, first of all, this guy, John Sauer, I think his name is, the Solicitor General who argued for on behalf of the government. Very irritating personality. I don't know how much that sways the court, but very loud, talked very fast, constantly interrupting the justices, which to me doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. In fact, one of the justices, it could have been the chief, who said on one time when the guy jumped, a justice was asking a question, and then the Solicitor General just stepped on the question, and somebody said, let her ask the question. It was a woman asking the question, I think it was. But anyways, the point is, I listened to the arguments of both sides, and I don't think it went well for the government. That the tariffs are a tax, and this Solicitor General, I mean, I thought it was a stupid argument, to be honest, and saying that, well, the tariffs are not a tax. They're designed to cause a policy change in other countries, and that he said that, well, just the threat of a tariff, said it was the idea, are these tariffs to accomplish a goal, are they to raise revenue? And the Solicitor General argued that, well, Trump threatened tariffs on China to counter China's refusal to export to us certain critical minerals, and the Chinese backed off on that. So he said that the tariff never even had to be imposed, so it didn't raise any revenue, and so that's why the tariffs are okay, which I thought was a really ridiculous argument. Especially, what really surprises me now, so you don't have to be a lawyer to be a Supreme Court justice, and so I'm wondering, maybe I should try to become a Supreme Court justice, because when Trump announced these tariffs, there were two. I immediately thought they were unconstitutional, number one, and I thought that they were I just had just a couple of counter arguments just popped into my head, and they were made by the Supreme Court justices. And one reason why I think it went badly for the government is that the conservative justices, the conservative justices and the liberal justices, all the questions were pretty challenging and hostile to the government. Now, which is not to say that that they were not tough sometimes on the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs, by the way, there were two plaintiffs, so there were two lawyers on the other side arguing. One plaintiff is some businesses, having to pay these tariffs, and the other plaintiff was several states opposing the tariffs. But one of the things I said, well, right away, that if the idea of the tariffs is to limit, to punish these other countries, well, there are other things that are available, which is, or tools that are available. That's what one of the justices said. Well, just impose a quota. And to me, one argument the lawyer didn't make, which I would have made, is that imposing a quota does not necessarily limit the imports. It just means that we have to pay more, which is another thing that a point that one of the justices made. Well, Americans are paying the tariffs. You're not punishing another country. And the Solicitor General, as the president always does, and Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, surprised me also, push back on it, say, no, China is paying the tariffs. And then I'm saying, well, if the court rules against the government, then, and if the government has to return the tariffs that have been collected, well, so China's paying the tariffs. Why would that be so hard? Just write one check to China and send it to the Chinese government and let them divide it up among all the exporters. So I just don't think that they had a very strong argument. Let me see my notes here if I can read them. That's the real trick. Kagan said that. Why can't the government just ban the imports or set a quota? And what was I going to say? Sour, blah, blah, blah. I guess that was the main thing. There was another one. One thing that surprised me is that, well, the Solicitor General kept saying that the purpose of these tariffs was to change the behavior of other countries. And I'm surprised. Well, maybe somebody did, and I missed it because I missed the open, the very beginning of the arguments. But I would say Trump has said many, 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 many times, he's gone and said, well, all the other countries are ripping us off. They're getting all this money from us, and we're going to impose tariffs on them to get, never mind that we pay it. We pay the tariffs. But to say that it's obvious that the intent is to raise revenue. Also, you have to remember that Trump said that however the tariffs, we would reduce them, but not below 10%. Everybody would have to pay at least a 10% tariffs. And our allies, which was another point that one of the justices made, well, why are you imposing tariffs on our allies, on our friends? That's obviously not a problem. Imposing it on China might make sense, but there was a whole, I don't want to take up a lot of time. You can listen. It was on YouTube. You can listen to the whole oral argument, which is very interesting exchange. But you listen to the government's lawyers, and then you listen to the two lawyers for the other side, and they said very simply that you can't. That there are, for instance, one justice asked, because that if Trump can impose tariffs, what's the limit? The idea was about the delegation of the power of Congress to delegate its powers to another branch of government, which would violate the separation of powers. And the government lawyer was arguing that, well, yeah, that this act, this emergency act, allows to say, well, to do restrictions, to do reviews, to grant licenses, and there was a whole back and forth about that. That, well, if you're charging a fee for a license, isn't that revenue generating? And the guy pointed out, one of the plaintiff's lawyers pointed out, well, no, because sometimes we give licenses away, we give them for free, and you could just require these other countries to get a license. There are a lot of tools available, and as I said, as one of the justices said, a straight quota or ban on an import is a sure way to keep countries products coming in from other countries, or to pressure other countries, as opposed to a tariff, which doesn't necessarily keep an import out. Just means that we have to pay, the consumers have to pay more for it, but also the importer pays the import fee, actually, and then it's passed on to us. So we are actually paying these tariffs. And so the whole idea, well, we're going to punish these other countries by taxing us, just doesn't. And I think it's hurting Trump too. That was one of the I'm not talking about the elections today, maybe another day, though, but a big factor, I think, was that these, we're supposed to be I'm an independent, we conservatives, I guess, but the Republicans are supposed to be the low tax party, and you have the tariffs are a tax, and you have Republicans arguing for a tax, and you have the Democrats opposing it, which is a complete switcheroo. But then you have it's raising prices. It's not inflation. Inflation is when the federal government when the Treasury prints money. That causes inflation, but you can have, well, if there's a bad corn crop, then the price of corn will go up. That's not inflation, but you still get price increases. And to Trump's credit, gas in my area now is about like $2.50. Outside Memphis is about $2.50, which is pretty good, and it could go even lower. But the other things that have gone up, anything that's imported, they're all going up, and I think that was a factor in the election, because Trump he's promising to bring prices down, and well, actually, that's what it was. In New York City, the argument was about, Mondani's argument was about affordability, making everything affordable. Rent freezes, which is going to be terrible, but that's a subject again for another day. Free buses, free health care, universal health care, getting rid of what other free stuff? I don't know, just free health care, just things that he can't do because the people are going to, well, I'm going to get off on another track here right now about why this idea that millionaires will just stay in, what the heck, millionaires won't leave the city. Well, what he doesn't understand is, well, a lot of the real estate market just in New Jersey is soaring, and even though New Jersey is a high tax state, but they're not socialists there. And then Florida too, the big booming real estate market. I would expect the same thing in Texas and where I am in Tennessee. But anyways, well, maybe not where I am. I'm outside Memphis, and Nashville seems to be the hot place where everybody wants to go. But the point is that these millionaires won't leave. What people don't understand is there's a law in New York that his idea that he's going to put an additional tax on millionaires. Well, you have to live in New York for 180 days to be subject to the income tax. So if you're a millionaire, you can have multiple, well, a lot of them already do have multiple homes. So you could have a home in Florida, a home in New York, and then you could spend your winters in Florida and your summers in New York. And as long as your stay in New York is less than it could be 179 days, you won't pay any income tax. So you can have your cake and eat it too. Live half the time almost in New York City and pay no taxes. And so, which requires, and the city can't raise taxes anyhow. It's a state idea. And the same thing about freezing rents. There's a state rent board that sets the rate. So Mamdani can't do that either. There's going to be a lot of disappointed people in New York, put it that way. So getting back to the tariffs, though, I guess I should just sum up now that the argument, you could listen to the whole argument if you want to. It's probably about 2 or 3 hours, but it doesn't look good for the government to me. And I agree with the Supreme Court. I agree with all the people. Big mistake for Trump to go this tariff route. He's believed it almost. You can find videos of him talking about this like 30 years ago, and he just doesn't understand. He thinks that other countries are paying these tariffs and that he has a right to do it. And I don't think the most that he could do, there are other laws, but the question was, well, one of the justices asked us that because what the Solicitor General was arguing, one of his arguments was that, well, Congress has the power to tax, and a tariff, it could be a tax, but not is a tax. I think it is a tax, and the Supreme Court seemed to think, all the justices seemed to think it was a tax, but said that the Congress could delegate its power to tax to the executive branch, to allow the president to impose taxes. But when that was ever done in the past, I would say, like, one example that was adduced was that there was that the president could impose a tariff of a certain amount for 150 days, something, with a strict limit, not an unlimited argument tax. And so one of the justices just said, "Yeah, this was an argument. This is why I think I could be on the Supreme Court, because this was an argument that occurred to me when I heard some talking head from the government, I forget which one, saying that the president had the right to do that." And a justice said, "Well, what if Congress says, we're tired of debating these laws and passing all these laws and that, why don't we just give that power to the president?" And same with taxes. Let the president determine the tax rate. Let the president write the laws himself, and then just impose, and then just write them, and then just sign them. And because Congress doesn't want to be bothered with it anymore. Obviously, under the Constitution, the Congress can't do that. It cannot just give its powers, just wholesale give its powers to another branch. So that would be something I would have, this whole emergency act, I would have challenged the constitutionality of the act itself, instead of dwelling so much on the nuances of the act, which is what they did a lot. Just say whether that act is whether that's constitutional. But the basic argument was that if by the plaintiffs was, if this emergency act has it states specific things that the president can do, and impose a tariff is not one of them. And that if Congress wants to give the president the power, as they did with this 150-day certain amount example that I just cited, then the Congress can do that. But the Congress didn't. So there it is today, kind of just maybe rambling a little bit, but the oral arguments ended just maybe a half hour ago, and I haven't. These are just my initial impressions, but the takeaway from it is, and there's going to be, the Chief Justice said anyway, so we know we're going to get, usually the decision would be announced next summer, but they say they're going to expedite it because it's such an important issue, which it obviously is, because if it's unconstitutional, if the president cannot collect these tariffs, then you don't want to have them several more months collecting these tariffs and then have to return them. And it's, I don't know. As far as what to do with the tariffs, that I don't know. I don't know what the Supreme Court does. Maybe say, okay, well, you can keep the money that you got so far, but you cannot get any more. And also what it's going to do with all these deals that people are saying that, well, the president, okay, even if he can't do it, look at all these deals he made and these investments in the country. But as my understanding is, a lot of these are not written contracts. They're just dignitaries coming to the White House and saying, we're going to invest so much, or some corporate heads say, we're going to invest so much in America. And maybe they can just abrogate all those deals and say, well, you can't impose these tariffs, so there's no more pressure on us. So big mess. But this is, as I said, I call them as I see them, even though I'm conservative, and I do have on tariffs and foreign policy. I do have domestically, that's another thing, but foreign policy and tariffs, I have a lot of problems with this president, and he was really stupid to do what he did with these tariffs. If he was going to do that, he should have picked one country and imposed the tariffs and then let it get challenged in the Supreme Court and then get a ruling before imposing it on the whole world. I don't know how you justify tariffs on Switzerland and some small African country if you're claiming there's an emergency. And that's another thing. These tariffs, we've had tariffs since the beginning of the country, since the country was founded, over the 250 years. Why, next year will be the 250th anniversary. Why is it suddenly an emergency now? And there are certain things like steel and aluminum where you can make an argument, but again, the best way to do that is to say limit the imports of steel. That's all. Just put a quota on steel or and aluminum or anything you want to put it on. That is the right way to do it. And not only the right way, it's the legal way, the constitutional way, and it's the effective way. And why Trump, and he just screws with the markets all the time. I guess this is the ranting part of Gene Rants, because you'll see the market will the market is going up, stock market's doing well, and then Trump announces a 100% tariff on China, and boom, it goes down. And every time he opens his mouth on tariffs, the market goes berserk, and usually it goes down because he's usually announcing an increase. And I guess that's it. I'll just throw in that I think he's being rope-a-doped by the Chinese. But that's another subject for another day. We'll see if they keep their commitments. And that's it. That's it for sure. That is it for today. I've spoken enough. Now you can speak in the comment section below this video. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Share this video with anyone you think could benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I'd love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.